Greetings, this is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct today from Black Facts Headquarters Central with another installment of Doc Ock at noon and 9. It's good to be here today, and hopefully we'll be able to share a little knowledge that you couldn't get in college with everybody out there, so you can be more aware. So you won't just be woke, but you won't be historically broke, right? Because you could be woke, but you could be broke at the very same time. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and get this thing on the road by having you go ahead and give us a like if you're watching us on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up if you're looking at us on the tube. And then go ahead and subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel if you will. We'd really appreciate it because it would give us such a thrill. We'd be able to sit here and chill as we read you some more of these stories that are absolutely for real. All right, I got a short one for you today. Proverb of the day. The egg becomes a cock. Now, when I say cock, you know I'm talking about a rooster, right? Cock of the rock. The egg becomes a cock. Very short proverb. Very short proverb, and that one is from Niger. All right, moving on to our book of the moment, our story of the moment. Granny Nanny, otherwise known as Nanny of the Maroons, the mother of us all. Oh yes, she is a real mother for us. And we got 2 more days, today and tomorrow, to continue reading about old Granny Nanny. One of the Maroons, leader of the Maroons, as a matter of fact. That's why we came with this one over here. Leader of the Maroons, 1500 to 1865 and counting. That was the rebellion. So you're seeing that the rebellion there lasted for what? 165 years. But the Maroons continue to live up in the hills in Jamaica right now today. So this brings us all the way into the present, which, as you already know, is a gift. So let's see where we left off at yesterday. Okay, the Maroon Wars, because that's what we're talking about here. African rebellion in the Americas from 1500 to 1865. The Maroon Wars were conducted by a people who would not be enslaved. They were fierce fighters, master strategists. Even the colonial planters who hated the Maroons and black people in general had in the end to concede that they were confronted with a superior fighting force. In the history of Jamaica, Edward Long, the planter, whose contemptuous words have been cited earlier, calls the Maroons' achievements the amazing efforts of a handful of brave men, and he further goes on to say, the midland parts of the island are so defensible by acclivities, woods, and difficult passes that an army of the best regular troops would not find it an easy task to dislodge a very small band of well-provided and intrepid opponents. We have some proof of this from the tedious and expensive war carried on for many years with the contemptible gang of Negroes called the Wild Negroes, who kept possession of these recesses and held it out against 40 times their number, though unsupported during the time with any fresh supply of arms, ammunition, water, food, etc., except what was sold to them by the Jews. I didn't know he was going to bring them in. And at length were able to put an end to the struggle by a treaty of peace, the more honorable to them as it confirmed the full enjoyment of that freedom for which they had so long and obstinately contended. Long recognizes their military achievements, yet he belittles and fails to understand what their maroonage means by saying that a peace treaty with the British earned them their freedom. In fact, they had achieved it themselves and had maintained freedom for more than 80 years in the various Maroon communities. It could be said that the Maroon Wars continued ceaselessly from the arrival of the British in 1655 until the signing of the last treaty in 1740. However, after this date, notably in 1795 with the Trelawney Town War, there were still uprisings and rebellions. During the 85 years of rebellion against the British, there were periods of relative peace and others that were marked by more intense fighting. During this nearly century-long struggle, the desperate state of the British is punctuated by numerous letters from the colony to the king. One such letter states, "We are not in a condition to defend ourselves. The terror of them, the Maroons, spreads itself everywhere, and the ravages and barbarities they commit have determined several planters to abandon their settlements." That was an address of the governor, etc., to the king. There was real fear that the wars with the Maroons would cause the British to give up Jamaica. Indeed, the threat of the Maroons was great and growing daily, so much so that it forced many planters to leave the island altogether. The major slave revolts of the 17th century, the precursors of the Maroon Wars, as these escaped slaves joined the Maroons in the mountains, occurred at Lobby's Plantation in 1673, in 1685, and in 1690. The group that led the rebellion at Lobby's Plantation, like other rebel slave groups, destroyed the party sent against them, thus discouraging other British attacks and encouraging slaves to flee and join them. The rebellion in 1690 proved critical because even though only a small band of 30 to 40 people escaped the slaveholders' retaliation, this group eventually became the leadership core of the Leeward Maroons. Between 1690 and 1724, there were not many records detailing the battles between Maroons and the colonists. Some historians say that the Maroons were quieter during this period, that they had retreated higher into the mountains to regroup, to organize, and to prepare. Others, while claiming that there is simply no record of this activity during this period, maintain that there was action. In 1724, however, records of skirmishes with Maroons begin to increase. Especially helpful are the memoirs of British Army officer Philip Thicknesse, who recounts in detail specific battles with the Windward Maroons. These anecdotes, even those written by the British, invariably speak of massive victories by the Maroons. In 1730, 3 major expeditions were mounted against the Windward Maroons. The Maroons proved to be completely elusive, and as one historian notes, the military expeditions were often ineffectual, if not disastrous, for the English. And success, when it came, usually meant destroying a settlement rather than killing Maroons. In fact, During the entire decade of the 1730s, the time of the most intense fighting, only about 100 Maroons were recorded as killed in the fighting. For the British, this same period of time represented the loss of thousands of lives. The site of the decisive battle of the Maroon Wars, and the only one that records the Maroons suffering significant losses, occurred in Nanny in 1734. Captain Stoddart led the British against the Maroons, and his attack is described by the 17th century historian Edward Long. In the year 1734, Captain Stoddart executed with great success an attack of the Maroon windward town called Nanny, situated on one of the highest mountains in the island. Having provided some portable swivel guns, he silently approached and reached within a small distance of their quarters. Undiscovered, after halting for some time, he began to ascend by the only path leading to their town. He found it steep, rocky, and difficult, and not wide enough to admit the passage of two persons abreast. However, he surmounted these obstacles, and having gained a small eminence, commanding the huts in which the Negroes were asleep, he fixed his little train of artillery to the best advantage and fired upon them so briskly that many were slain in their habitations, and several threw themselves headlong down the precipice. There has been some feeling among modern historians that this description is an exaggeration, although there is some truth to it, as the original Nanny was destroyed in 1734. Some say it was destroyed after the Maroons had left. There were a significant number of Maroons who survived this attack because they established a new settlement at New Nanny or Moortown, several miles away. Long's description, published in 1774, can be found word for word in Brian Edwards' Observations on the Disposition, Character, Manners, and Habits of Life of the Maroon Negroes on the Island of Jamaica. No need to write the piece after you wrote the title. Edwards notes the preceding section consists chiefly of an extract from the History of Jamaica by Edward Long, Esquire, published in 1774, whose account I have chosen to adopt rather than offer a narrative of my own, for two reasons. First, because I have no other to add, and secondly, because its adoption exempts me from all suspicion of having fabricated a tale. Edwards, 1796, page 535. Nannytown was, as mentioned earlier, constructed at the top of a very steep mountain with a narrow path that would provide space enough for one person only. With this construction, the Maroons were virtually immune to attack by a greater force. The British could mount the path only one at a time, single file, so that the Maroons would be able to isolate them and kill them one by one as they came up the path. This strategy, along with other clever military devices, including camouflage and a network of long-distance communication, were some of the ways which contributed to the Maroons' victory over the British. And we're going to end there as we're at the top of that page. We're going to end right there. So as you can see, these Maroons were no joke. They were no scuffling, scurvy band of misfits that had no idea how to not only arm and fight for themselves, but how to defend themselves by disallowing the British to be able to just rumble up there 3, 4, 5 abreast. They could only come one at a time. And if you could fight them one at a time, you could defeat them. They showed themselves quite capable of doing so, just as the Americans did. As a matter of fact, these writings in 1734, that's 30 years, 40 years before the Revolutionary War in the Americas, it makes one have to wonder, did the Americans read from the playbook of the Maroons? Did Thomas Jefferson and George Washington read from the playbook of the Maroons? Because the Americans used the same strategy the Maroons used, or very similar strategy in terms of guerrilla warfare. They had already shown the British could be defeated by a small band. Something to think about. Maybe we'll have to check our history books on that. Meanwhile, because we've been sold a bill of goods, you already knew that. Meanwhile, we're going to close this session out. We've got one more lively session to do tomorrow. And of course, we'll be coming back tonight to continue reading from the novel Free Enterprise about Mary Ellen Pleasant as from the viewpoint of Michelle Cliff and her historical novel. So be here tonight at 9. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9 signing off. Let me just say before I go, don't forget, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a like. If you're watching on the tube, give us a thumbs up. And last but not least, make sure to subscribe to our Black Facts YouTube channel below. In the meanwhile, peace, at least, with justice, because anything less disgusts us.